The ballpoint pen dug into the meat of my thumb, a sharp point of pressure that grounded me in a reality I desperately wanted to escape. "Sign it, Mom. Just sign it." The voice was familiar, a melodic contralto that used to sing nursery rhymes in the back seat of our old station wagon, but now it was laced with a jagged edge of impatience. Jessica leaned in closer, her expensive designer handbag sliding off her shoulder and hitting my elbow. At 38, my daughter had maintained the porcelain skin of her youth, but her eyes, once bright and curious, were now hardened by a decade of keeping up appearances she couldn't afford. Beside her sat Mark, her husband, a man whose sheer physical bulk seemed to suck the oxygen out of the small bank cubicle. His hand wasn't just resting on my forearm, it was a clamp. A silent threat disguised as a supportive gesture. His fingers, thick and smelling faintly of stale tobacco and mint gum, pressed down hard enough to bruise the fragile, paper-thin skin that comes with being 72. We were seated in the sterile, glass-walled office of the downtown branch of First National, surrounded by the hum of commerce and the low murmur of people making deposits, oblivious to the silent robbery taking place at desk number 4. "It is just a formality, Evelyn," Mark whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "We need to secure the bridge loan for the business. You know we are good for it. Think of Lily. Think of your granddaughter." The mention of Lily was a calculated strike, a weaponized memory of the 12-year-old girl who was the only bright spark left in my graying world. But I knew, with a clarity that cut through the fog of my fear, that he was lying. There was no bridge loan. There was no business expansion. I had seen the foreclosure notices they thought they had hidden. This wasn't a loan. This was in liquidation. They were here to drain my life savings, the $65,000 that sat in my retirement account, the last financial barrier between me and absolute destitution. The bank officer, a man named Mr. Sterling who looked too young to be managing anyone's money, typed something on his keyboard and looked up. His eyes flickered from the document to my face, then to Mark's hand on my arm, and finally to Jessica's tight, predatory smile. The air conditioning vent above us hissed, blowing cold air onto my neck, triggering a shiver that I couldn't suppress. I felt a wave of nausea, a hot, sticky panic that rose from my stomach to my throat. The fluorescent lights hummed with a frequency that drilled into my temples. Jessica smiled for the security camera in the corner, a practiced tilt of the head that screamed wholesome family outing, while underneath the table, she kicked my shin gently. "Come on, Mom," she hissed through her teeth, her smile never wavering. "Don't be difficult. We don't have all day." I looked down at the paper. The numbers swam before my eyes. $65,000. It represented 45 years of packed lunches, of skipped vacations, of patching coats instead of buying new ones. It was the money my late husband, Henry, had sweated for in the humid air of the textile factory. It was his life insurance. It was my independence. If I signed this, I would be nothing more than a guest in my own life, dependent on the charity of the two people who were currently holding me hostage in a leather chair. Mark squeezed harder, his thumb digging into a nerve, sending a jolt of pain up my shoulder. "Do it," he commanded, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in my chest. "We've done everything for you. Don't be ungrateful. Ungrateful." The word burned like acid. The irony was so thick it nearly choked me. I was the one who had paid for Jessica's weddings, both of them. I was the one who had handed over the down payment for their colonial in the suburbs, a house far too big for 3 people. I was the one who had covered Mark's legal fees when he got into that bar fight 3 years ago, $25,000 that vanished into the ether, never to be mentioned again. And now, they were here for the rest. My hands trembled violently, the pen shaking so hard it left a jagged blue trail on the desk blotter. One signature. That was all it took to erase a lifetime of security. One signature, and I would be destitute. Jessica leaned in, her perfume, a cloying scent of gardenias, mixing with the metallic smell of my own fear. "Mom, trust me. It is for your own protection. You are getting older. You can't manage these accounts anymore." Her words were poisoned honey, smooth and sweet, designed to disarm and demean in the same breath. She was gaslighting me in public, painting me as the senile old woman who needed her capable daughter to take the reins. I looked around the bank, desperate for a lifeline. A teller was counting stacks of 20s. A woman in a raincoat was filling out a deposit slip. No one saw the desperation in my eyes. No one saw that I was being mugged in broad daylight by people who claimed to love me. A choked sob escaped my throat, a small, pathetic sound that made Mark stiffen. "Shut up," he muttered, smiling broadly for the benefit of Mr. Sterling, who was returning with a stamp. "Don't make a scene, Evelyn. You know I hate scenes." His eyes were flat and dead, like a shark's, and in that moment I realized the terrifying truth. This man was capable of hurting me, not just financially, but physically, and my daughter, the child I had nursed through chicken pox and heartbreaks, was watching him do it with approval. The digital clock on the wall read 2:14 p.m., a rainy Tuesday in Seattle that had morphed into the darkest hour of my life. My mind reeled back to how I had gotten here. Jessica had called it dawn, her voice breathless with a manufactured emergency. "Mom, get dressed. We need to go to the bank. There is a compliance issue with your account. We need to verify your identity or they will freeze your assets." She hadn't given me time to think, to drink my coffee, to call the bank myself. She had just appeared at my door, bundling me into the car before I could find my reading glasses. It was a kidnapping disguised as a favor. Mr. Sterling sat down, adjusting his tie. "Is everything in order, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, his voice professional but his eyes sharp. He wasn't looking at the papers, he was looking at me. He was looking at Mark's hand on my arm. He was looking at the tears pooling in my lower eyelids. This was my chance. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I couldn't speak. Fear had paralyzed my vocal cords. But my hand, the hand that had spent decades writing grocery lists and thank you notes, acted on instinct. While Jessica was busy checking her reflection in her phone screen and Mark was glaring at the security guard, I scribbled on a sticky note attached to the withdrawal slip. It wasn't a signature. It was a plea. Help. Coerced. Don't let me sign. I slid the paper across the polished mahogany toward Mr. Sterling. He placed his hand over it, his expression unchanging, a mask of professional indifference. But then his eyes widened imperceptibly. He looked at me, really looked at me, and gave a microscopic nod. In that instant, the crushing weight on my chest lightened just a fraction. He understood. Without breaking eye contact, he pressed a silent button beneath the rim of his desk. To understand the gravity of this moment, to understand why a mother would need a bank manager to save her from her own child, you have to understand who Evelyn Vance was before she became this trembling victim. I wasn't always this way. For 40 years, I was the woman who made things happen. I was the fixer. I was the matriarch. I remember the day Jessica was born, a stormy night in November. Henry held my hand, his face pale with worry, until the doctor placed that screaming, red-faced bundle on my chest. She had Henry's nose and my chin, and when she opened her eyes, I made a silent vow to the universe. This child would never know want. She would never know the gnawing hunger I had grown up with during the lean years. I promised to be her shield. I kept that promise, perhaps too well. When Jessica was 7, she wanted a specialized gymnastics camp that cost more than our monthly mortgage. Henry worked overtime at the factory, and I took in sewing jobs, ruining my eyesight under dim lamps until the tuition was paid. When she was 16, she crashed her first car, a used Honda we had scraped together, cash to buy. She wasn't hurt, thank God, but she was hysterical about the insurance premiums. "Don't worry, baby," I had soothed her, holding her shaking shoulders. "We will handle it. We always handled it." When she insisted on a private liberal arts college instead of the state university, arguing that she needed the network, we mortgaged the house. Henry argued against it late at night, his voice hushed so she wouldn't hear. "Evelyn, we are mortgaging our retirement," he had warned, but I silenced him. "It is her future, Henry. We can always make more money." We couldn't make more money. Henry's health began to decline the year Jessica graduated. The factory closed, his pension was slashed, and the medical bills for his heart condition began to mount. Yet when Jessica met Mark, a smooth-talking real estate developer with big dreams and empty pockets, I didn't hesitate to fund their wedding. It cost $40,000. It was a fairy tale event complete with a string quartet and imported orchids. Jessica looked like a princess, radiant and triumphant. Mark looked like he had won the lottery. I remember standing in the reception line, my feet aching in cheap shoes I had dyed to match my dress because I couldn't afford new ones, smiling until my face hurt. The pattern was set. I was the supply. They were the demand. After Henry died 3 years ago, the dynamic shifted from requests to expectations. The grief had left me hollow, vulnerable, and they moved into that empty space with the precision of an invading army. "Mom, the roof is leaking. Mom, Lily needs braces. Mom, Mark's investment didn't pay out this month. I gave and I gave and I gave. I gave out of love, then out of habit, and finally out of fear. Fear that if I stopped paying, they would stop coming. Fear that if I closed the wallet, I would lose access to Lily, my sweet artistic granddaughter, who was the only person who looked at me and saw a human being, not a bank account." Back in the bank office, the atmosphere had shifted. Mr. Sterling stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. "Mrs. Vance, before we finalize a transaction of this magnitude, bank protocol requires a secondary verification in a private setting. Just a formality to confirm the wire details." Jessica's head snapped up. "That is ridiculous. She signed the papers. Just process it." Her voice had lost its melodic quality. It was now a shrill command. Mr. Sterling didn't flinch. "I am afraid it is mandatory, ma'am. Federal regulations regarding elder financial safety. I need Mrs. Vance to step into the secure vault area with me for 2 minutes. Alone." Mark stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He towered over the desk, his face darkening. "She doesn't go anywhere without us. She gets confused. She needs assistance." Mr. Sterling signaled to the 2 uniformed security guards who had quietly positioned themselves at the door. "Sir, I must insist. If you cause a disturbance, I will have to ask you to leave the premises." The guards took a step forward, hands resting near their belts. The threat was unspoken but clear. Mark looked at the guards, then at Mr. Sterling, and finally at the security cameras. He was a bully, and like all bullies, he crumbled when faced with actual authority. He released my arm. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. Jessica grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my palm. "Mom, don't say anything stupid, just sign the papers and come back. Lily is waiting for us for dinner, remember? Pizza night." She dangled my granddaughter's name like a lure. I pulled my hand away, the friction burning my skin. "I will be right back," I whispered, unable to look her in the eye. Mr. Sterling led me into a back office, a windowless room that smelled of coffee and ozone. He closed the heavy door, and the silence was instantaneous. He turned to me, his face softening into genuine concern. "Mrs. Vance, you are safe here. I saw your note. Tell me what is happening." And just like that, the dam broke. I told him everything. I told him about the years of emotional blackmail, the drained savings, the threats, the way Mark had bruised my arm, the way Jessica had lied about the bridge loan. I told him I had $65,000 left in the world, and if they took it, I wouldn't be able to pay my property taxes or buy my heart medication. Mr. Sterling listened, taking furious notes. When I finished, he looked up, his expression grim. "Mrs. Vance, this is financial exploitation. It is a crime. We are not processing this transfer. Furthermore, I am placing a freeze on all your accounts. No one, not even you, can withdraw more than $100 without coming here and speaking to me personally." He paused. "But you need to do the hardest part. You need to walk out there and tell them no." The walk back to the lobby felt like walking to the gallows, but as I looked at Mr. Sterling, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt since Henry died. Anger. Pure, righteous anger. I wasn't just a mother. I was a person. I had rights. I had dignity. I opened the door. Jessica and Mark were waiting, pacing like caged tigers. When they saw me without the receipt, Jessica's face contorted. "Where's the slip, Mom? Did you get the cashier's check?" I took a deep breath, inhaling the sterile bank air, and let it fill my lungs. "No, Jessica," I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "There is no check. I am not signing." The silence that followed was absolute. Mark stepped forward, his face turning a violent shade of red. "What did you say?" he growled. I said, "No, Mark, I am not giving you my retirement money. Not today, not ever." Jessica looked at me as if I had grown a second head. "Mom, stop playing games. We need that money. It is already allocated." "Allocated?" I laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Allocated for what? Another failed business venture? Another vacation you can't afford? A new car to impress neighbors you don't even like?" Jessica's eyes narrowed. "We do this for the family, Mom. For Lily." "Stop it," I shouted, and the volume of my own voice surprised me. Heads turned across the lobby. "Do not use her name to manipulate me. You are not doing this for Lily. You are doing this because you are 38 years old and you refuse to live within your means. You are doing this because you think I am a resource, not a mother." Mark lunged, grabbing for my arm again. "You senile old hag. You will sign that paper right now or I will—" "Sir!" Mr. Sterling's voice boomed across the lobby. The security guards were on Mark in a second, blocking his path. "Step away from Mrs. Vance immediately. Police are on their way." "Police?" Jessica shrieked. "You called the cops on your own family? Mom, how could you?" I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. I saw the selfishness etched into the lines of her mouth, the entitlement in her stance, and I realized that by always saying yes, I had helped create this monster. I had crippled her with my generosity. I had taught her that love was a transaction. "I didn't call them, Jessica," I said, my voice steady, "but I won't stop them. You tried to steal from me. You hurt me. That isn't family. That is predation." "Get out," Mark spat, pulling away from the guard. "You will regret this, Evelyn. You will die alone in that house. We will never let you see Lily again. Never." The threat hit its mark, piercing my heart. But I stood my ground. If that is the price of my dignity, then so be it. Go. They left, a storm of curses and threats, escorted out by the guards. I watched them go, watched the heavy glass doors swing shut behind them, and then I sank into a chair and wept. I wept not for the money, but for the loss of the illusion. The illusion that I had a loving family. The illusion that my daughter respected me. The days that followed were a blur of silence and noise. The silence of my empty house and the noise of the digital assault. Jessica texted incessantly, essays about my selfishness, photos of Lily crying, voicemails from Mark detailing how they were going to lose their house and it was all my fault. They even tried to gaslight me into believing I had dementia, leaving messages saying they were petitioning for power of attorney because I was mentally unstable. But I had Mr. Sterling. He helped me get a restraining order. He connected me with a lawyer who specialized in elder law. And surprisingly, I had Sarah. Sarah was my niece, my sister's daughter, whom I hadn't seen in years because Jessica had always been jealous of her. Sarah heard about the incident through the family grapevine and showed up at my door with a casserole and a fierce determination. She helped me change my locks. She helped me block their numbers. She sat with me while I cried over the loss of Lily. Months passed. The silence from Jessica's camp turned from aggressive to icy. I missed Lily with a physical ache, but I held on to the knowledge that allowing them back in would destroy me. I joined a support group at the community center for seniors who had experienced financial abuse. Listening to others, a retired teacher whose son had gambled away her pension, a widow whose nephew had stolen her jewelry, I realized I wasn't stupid. I was a mother who loved too much. One rainy afternoon, almost a year later, I was looking at my bank statement. The $65,000 was still there. It had actually grown slightly with interest. I looked at the walls of my house, the house Henry and I had bought 40 years ago. It felt too big, too full of ghosts. "Sarah," I said over tea that Sunday, "I think I want to sell the house." Sarah looked up, surprised. "And go where, Aunt Evelyn?" I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Provence." "Provence?" Sarah laughed, delighted. "Like in France?" "Henry always wanted to go," I said softly. "We saved for it 3 times, and 3 times we spent the money on Jessica. Braces, tuition, the wedding. I am 73 years old, Sarah. If not now, when? I sold the house. I downsized to a small, manageable condo in a secure complex, and with the surplus, I booked a ticket to France. Jessica heard about it, of course. The angry emails managed to filter through to my spam folder. You are spending our inheritance on a vacation? You are selfish to the core. I deleted them without reading past the first line. France was a revelation. I rented a small cottage outside of Avignon. I ate fresh bread with heavy butter. I drank wine at lunch. I walked through fields of lavender that smelled like heaven. For the first time in decades, I wasn't Evelyn the mother, or Evelyn the widow, or Evelyn the ATM. I was just Evelyn. I took a painting class. I made friends with a British expat named Julian who made me laugh. One evening, sitting on my terrace watching the sun dip below the vineyards, my phone rang. It was Mr. Sterling. "Evelyn, I hate to disturb your trip, but I thought you should know," he said. "Jessica and Mark came into the branch today. They tried to access an old joint savings account you opened for Jessica when she was in college. They thought you might have forgotten about it." My heart skipped a beat, but not from fear, from clarity. "Did they get anything?" "No." Mr. Sterling chuckled. "You closed that account 6 months ago. It had $12 in it. But the attempt, Evelyn, they forged your signature on a withdrawal slip. We have it on camera. We've contacted the authorities. This is a felony." I took a sip of wine, the liquid dark and rich on my tongue. "Do what you have to do, Arthur. I am done protecting them." Hanging up, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. The final cord was cut. I wasn't responsible for their crimes, their failures, or their consequences. I was only responsible for my own peace. 2 years passed. I returned from France, a changed woman. I wore colorful scarves. I took up gardening. I volunteered at the library. I was happy. But there was still a hole in my heart, shaped like a little girl named Lily. Then, one Saturday morning, there was a knock on my condo door. I opened it to find a tall, gangly teenager with familiar eyes standing on my welcome mat. She had a backpack slung over one shoulder, and she looked terrified. "Lily?" I breathed, hardly daring to believe it. She was 14 now, no longer a child, but a young woman. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice cracking. "I took the bus. Mom doesn't know I'm here." I ushered her in, my hands shaking as I made her hot chocolate, just the way she used to like it. We sat on my new yellow sofa, the air thick with unsaid things. "Why did you leave us?" she asked finally, looking down at her cup. "Mom said you hated us. She said you wanted to keep all your money for yourself and let us starve." I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in my head, but looking at her pain, the script vanished. I had to be honest. "Lily, look at me. I never hated you. I loved you more than anything. But your parents, they were hurting me. Not just my feelings, but my life. They wanted to take everything I had to survive. But Mom said, 'Your mom is sick, Lily.' I said it gently but firmly. 'She has a sickness that makes her think money is love, and she used you to try and hurt me. I wrote you letters, every month. Did you get them?' Lily shook her head, tears spilling over. 'No, she never gave me anything. I found your address in her desk drawer yesterday when I was looking for a stapler. I missed you." I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight as she sobbed into my shoulder. I held her until the shaking stopped, until the years of separation began to melt away in the warmth of the embrace. "Grandma?" she asked, pulling back and wiping her eyes. "Is it true you went to France?" "It is," I smiled, reaching for the photo album on the coffee table. "And one day, when you are old enough, I will take you there. We will eat croissants and paint sunflowers." Lily visited me in secret for the next 2 years, until she got her driver's license and could come openly. Jessica tried to stop her, threatened her. But Lily had seen the truth. She saw the peace in my home versus the chaos in hers. She saw that I wasn't the villain of the story, but a survivor. Looking back now, from the vantage point of 75, I realize the lesson that took me a lifetime to learn. We are taught that a mother's love must be sacrificial, that we must burn ourselves to keep our children warm. But that is a lie. A martyr is not a mother. To truly love others, you must first respect yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you certainly cannot help anyone if you allow them to break the cup to get the last drop. I saved my money that day in the bank, yes. But more importantly, I saved my soul. I taught my granddaughter that a woman's worth is not found in what she gives, but in who she is. And as I watch Lily paint in the corner of my sunlit living room, free from the cycle of manipulation that ensnared her parents, I know that was the greatest gift I could have ever given her. I didn't give her money. I gave her an example of how to be free.